The rain hammered against the cracked pavement as Marcus Chen stepped out of the convenience store, a plastic bag containing instant noodles and a carton of milk swinging from his weathered hand. The fluorescent lights from the store cast long shadows across the empty parking lot. It was nearly midnight, and the street was deserted except for a few scattered cars and the occasional homeless person huddled beneath tattered blankets in doorways. Marcus pulled his worn jacket tighter around his chest. The fabric was thin, offering little protection against the biting cold that swept through the city streets. He had been living like this for 3 years now, ever since everything fell apart. Ever since the day he walked away from everything he had known, everything he had been. His sneakers splashed through puddles as he made his way toward the abandoned warehouse where he had been sleeping for the past 2 weeks. It wasn't much, but it had a roof and kept most of the rain out. That was more than he'd had in some places. Marcus had learned not to expect much from life anymore. Expectations led to disappointment, and he'd had enough of that to last several lifetimes. The tattoo on his left forearm itched beneath the sleeve of his jacket. It always did when the weather changed. Marcus resisted the urge to scratch it. The design was intricate, a detailed eagle with wings spread wide, clutching an anchor in its talons. Below it, waves crashed against rocks, and above it, stars formed a constellation that only those who knew would recognize. It was beautiful work, done by a master artist in a small shop in San Diego, years ago when Marcus was a different person entirely. He didn't look at it much anymore. Looking at it meant remembering, and remembering hurt too much. As Marcus turned the corner onto 8th Street, blue and red lights suddenly flooded his vision. 2 police cars screeched to a halt, blocking his path. Car doors flew open, and officers emerged with hands on their weapons. "Hands where we can see them!" one officer shouted, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. Marcus froze. His heart hammered in his chest as confusion washed over him. The plastic bag slipped from his fingers, the milk carton hitting the ground with a dull thud. "On the ground! Now!" another officer commanded. "What's going on? I didn't do anything," Marcus said, but his voice was drowned out by the authoritative shouts. He knew better than to resist. Slowly, carefully, he lowered himself to his knees, then lay flat on the wet pavement. The cold water soaked through his clothes immediately. Rough hands grabbed his arms, pulling them behind his back. Metal handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, biting into his skin. Marcus winced, but remained silent. He had learned that talking during an arrest only made things worse. "Marcus Chen, you're under arrest for the armed robbery of First National Bank," one of the officers said, reading him his rights in a monotone voice that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times before. "What? I didn't rob any bank," Marcus protested as they hauled him to his feet. Water dripped from his hair into his eyes. "You've got the wrong person." "Save it for the station," the officer replied, guiding him roughly toward one of the patrol cars. Marcus was shoved into the back seat, his head barely clearing the doorframe. The door slammed shut with a finality that made his stomach drop. Through the rain-streaked window, he watched the officers pick up his scattered groceries, examining them briefly before tossing them into a nearby trash can. $3.47 worth of food, gone. That had been almost all the money he had left. The ride to the police station was silent except for the squawk of the radio and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. Marcus stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. A bank robbery? He hadn't even been near a bank in months. He barely had enough money to justify going to one. At the station, the fluorescent lights were harsh and unforgiving, and they processed him like a piece of cargo, taking his fingerprints, his photo, cataloging his few possessions. A wallet with an expired ID and $2, a broken watch that didn't work, a small pocket knife. They took everything and sealed it in a plastic bag with a number written in black marker. "I want to call someone," Marcus said as they led him to an interrogation room. "You'll get your phone call," the officer replied, but there was no conviction in his voice, no promise that it would happen any time soon. The interrogation room was small and windowless, painted a depressing shade of beige that had yellowed with age. A metal table was bolted to the floor, with 2 chairs on either side. They uncuffed one of Marcus's hands, only to recuff it to a metal ring attached to the table. Then they left him there, and alone with his thoughts and the steady hum of the ventilation system. Marcus had no idea how long he sat there. It could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours. Time seemed to move differently in that little room. His wet clothes clung to his skin, making him shiver. The handcuff chafed against his wrist, and his shoulder ached from the awkward position. Finally, the door opened. 2 detectives entered, one older with gray hair and a tired expression, the other younger with sharp eyes that missed nothing. They carried folders and a laptop, setting them down on the table with deliberate precision. "Mr. Chen," the older detective said, settling into his chair with a sigh. "I'm Detective Harrison, and this is Detective Lopez. We need to talk about what happened at First National Bank this afternoon." "I wasn't at any bank," Marcus said firmly. "I've been sleeping in an old warehouse on 12th Street for the past 2 weeks. I haven't robbed anyone." Detective Lopez opened his laptop and turned it around so Marcus could see the screen. Security camera footage played, showing a man in a dark jacket and baseball cap entering a bank. The footage was grainy, the man's face partially obscured by the cap, but his build was similar to Marcus's. "That's not me," Marcus insisted. "The suspect fled on foot after threatening the teller with what appeared to be a weapon," Harrison continued, ignoring Marcus's protest. "He got away with approximately $12,000. A witness gave us a description that matches you pretty closely. Same height, same build, a same general appearance." "Lots of people probably match that description," Marcus argued. "You can't just arrest someone based on same general appearance." "We also found this," Lopez said, sliding a photograph across the table. It showed a man's arm with a tattoo clearly visible, an eagle with spread wings, clutching an anchor. "The suspect's sleeve rode up during the robbery. The teller got a good look at this tattoo. You have a tattoo on your left forearm, don't you, Mr. Chen?" Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Let me see my arm," he said quietly. Lopez uncuffed him from the table, and Marcus pushed up his sleeve. There it was, his tattoo, looking exactly like the one in the photograph. But it wasn't him. It couldn't be him. "Lots of people have eagle tattoos," Marcus said, but even to his own ears it sounded weak. Not like this one," Harrison said. "This is pretty distinctive. The anchor, the waves, the stars arranged in that specific pattern. The teller was very specific about these details. She studies art, apparently. Has a good eye for this kind of thing." Marcus stared at the tattoo on his arm, his mind reeling. How was this possible? He had been nowhere near a bank. He had spent the entire day looking for aluminum cans to recycle, then had gone to the public library to get warm and maybe use the internet for a few minutes. He had witnesses. The librarian had seen him. The guy at the recycling center had seen him. "I want a lawyer," Marcus said finally. It was the only smart thing to do. He knew enough about the system to know that anything he said could and would be used against him. "That's your right," Harrison said, standing up. "We'll get you a public defender, but I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Chen. The evidence is pretty damning. The description matches, the tattoo matches, and you don't have a solid alibi. If you cooperate, tell us where the money is. Things will go easier for you." "I don't have any money because I didn't rob any bank," Marcus said, his voice rising in frustration. "I'm homeless. I was buying instant noodles with my last $3 when you arrested me. Does that sound like someone who just stole $12,000? The detectives exchanged a glance. "Maybe you stashed it somewhere," Lopez suggested. "Maybe you were planning to lie low for a while before accessing it. We've seen it before." They left him alone again, and this time Marcus put his head down on the cold metal table. But his life had been hard for the past 3 years, but it had been his life. He had his freedom, limited as it was. Now, even that was being taken away for something he didn't do. Hours passed. Marcus was moved to a holding cell, a small concrete box with a metal bench and a toilet in the corner. 2 other men were already there, both sleeping or pretending to sleep. Marcus sat on the bench and stared at the wall. Morning came without fanfare. The lights in the cell were on 24 hours a day, making it impossible to tell what time it was. A guard brought him a tray with something that might have been eggs and definitely was toast, along with a small carton of orange juice. Marcus ate mechanically, tasting nothing. "Chen, you've got a visitor," the guard called several hours later, or maybe it was the next day. Marcus had lost track. They took him to a small room where a tired-looking woman in a rumpled suit waited with a stack of papers. She introduced herself as Jennifer Walsh, his public defender. "I've reviewed your case," she said without preamble, her voice suggesting she had too many cases and not enough time. "The evidence against you is circumstantial but compelling. The tattoo is the strongest piece. I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Chen. Unless you can provide a solid alibi, or we can find evidence that proves you weren't at the bank, this is going to be difficult." "I was at the recycling center on 5th Street around 11 in the morning, Marcus said. "Then I went to the public library on Grant Avenue. I was there until they closed at 6. The librarians can confirm it. Check their security cameras." Walsh made notes. "I'll look into it. But the robbery occurred at 2:15 in the afternoon. The library is only about 10 minutes from the bank. You would have had time to go there, commit the robbery, and return." Marcus felt desperation rising in his chest. "I didn't do this. I swear I didn't do this." "I believe you," Walsh said, though her tone suggested she'd heard similar protestations many times before. "But what I believe doesn't matter. It's what we can prove that matters. Tell me about your tattoo. Where did you get it? When?" Marcus swallowed hard. This was the part he didn't want to talk about, the part that meant diving back into memories he'd spent 3 years trying to forget. "I got it 8 years ago," he said quietly. "In San Diego. I was in the Navy." Walsh's pen paused on her notepad. "You were in the Navy?" "For 12 years. I enlisted right out of high school. Worked my way up to petty officer first class. I served on the USS Fitzgerald." Marcus's voice grew distant. "The tattoo was designed by a guy in our unit. Several of us got matching ones, or similar ones anyway. It represented our brotherhood, our commitment to each other and to the mission." "What happened? Why did you leave the Navy?" Walsh asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's personal, and it's not relevant to this case." "Everything is potentially relevant," Walsh countered. "If you were in the Navy, you have a history of service, of honor. That could help your case. A judge and jury might look more favorably on a veteran than on someone with no background." "I'm not a veteran," Marcus said bitterly. "I was dishonorably discharged